need our funding. We need our monies.
Tonight, Governor Greg Abbott's school choice priority bill takes center stage in the Texas House.
Just another opportunity for a dad to choose a school for their daughter.
The back and forth continues just days after a vote to keep voucher funding out of the budget. Plus,
deterrence is going to be key to prevent an invasion from Communist China.
A Texas Republican takes on the controversial issue of Taiwan. House Foreign Affairs Chair McCaul leads a trip overseas amid rising tensions with China. And later, bringing down the high cost of medications. How one state lawmaker hopes to enlist Canada to lower the price of prescriptions for Texans. Capital Tonight starts right now. Thanks for joining us here on Capital Tonight. I'm Karina Kling. Public school teachers came to the Capitol today to testify against a bill that would allow parents to use tax dollars to send their children to a private or charter school. It's a priority of Governor Abbott's, but so far only the Senate is showing support. The House voted against funding any voucher-like programs last week. But as our Charlotte Scott reports, both sides know the fight is not over until it's over.
Yolanda Merritt has been a special education teacher at Spring ISD for 15 years.
I'm for the students who can't speak. I'm for the students who are learning how to eat, how to clothe themselves.
She does not support a so-called school choice program, which would allow parents to take public school tax dollars and use them for a different type of education.
It just hurts my heart to think that we want to take public dollars and use it for a specific population of students.
Quality of public school is
North Texas Representative James Frank defended his bill Tuesday. It would create education savings accounts using $500 million that would be managed by the comptroller.
It's good for parents, it's good for kids, and it's good for schools.
Low-income families would be eligible for $10,300. Wealthier children or those already enrolled in private school would be eligible for half that amount. But not all lawmakers are sold on the idea.
Why not just take these limited funds that we have and make sure that we create a setting for every child?
There is a constitutional issue that we need to address one way or the other.
One Texan who showed up to testify says the money would allow his daughter, Mary, who has Down syndrome, to go to a private school.
Both my wife and I work, but we're still making clear under $100,000, and this would help us to get another option for my daughter's education.
The purpose of an education system is to educate kids, not to prop up any particular system.
Nathan Kaneen is with the American Federation for Children. Last week's House vote to prohibit voucher funding in the budget sent a strong signal these bills likely aren't going anywhere. But Kaneen is banking on the conference committee, a smaller group of lawmakers in the House and Senate who figure out the final budget behind closed doors, will remove that amendment and allow school choice funding.
That amendment is not yet law. The Senate has passed a compelling school choice bill, and with Texas leadership and support, I have a lot of hope that we can get school choice done this year.
But Merritt wishes the $500 million would instead go to teacher raises, more resources, and licensed psychologists on public school campuses.
It would be unimaginable some of the things that we could do with that money.
For Capital Tonight, I'm Charlotte Scott.
Charlotte, thank you. Let's get a check now of some of the other political stories making headlines across the state. A Texas man recently convicted of murdering a Black Lives Matter protester is asking for a new trial. Daniel Perry's defense team claims the court excluded evidence to show that Perry was not the first aggressor. This comes as Governor Abbott is asking the state pardon and parole board to recommend clemency for Perry so he can issue a pardon. Today, the Travis County District Attorney wrote to the board asking them to meet with the victim's family and to present all case evidence to board members. The state Senate passed a bill creating an endowment for some Texas colleges. It would create the Texas University Fund for schools like Texas Tech, University of Houston, Texas State, and the University of North Texas. It excludes schools in the University of like the University of Texas and Texas A&M systems, which benefit from the permanent university fund. The Senate approved $2.5 billion, while the House version has $3.5 billion. Some state lawmakers are calling on one of their own colleagues to resign after it was reported he had an inappropriate relationship with an intern. Republican House members Briscoe Cain and Steve Toth and Democrat Ana Maria Ramos took to social media to say far-right Republican Representative Brian Slayton should step down. A complaint filed with the House Investigating Committee alleges Slayton gave alcohol to a 20-year-old intern. We want to bring in our political analysts now, Republican Ted DeLisi and Democrat Manny Garcia. Good to see you both.
Good to see you.
Let's start with this Representative Slayton, the complaint. Ted, Representatives Cain and Toth usually align with Slayton on the issues. I mean, what's it say now that they're calling for him to step down?
I mean, I don't think I know a ton of the facts, but what's been alleged is the fact that this representative invited a member of his own staff to his apartment after 10 p.m. She was under 21, gave her alcohol, and yeah, it's just got. I think we need all the facts to come to light, but it, on its face, it's just the most egregious type of abuse of power, and I just think that there's lots of people who are interested in politics who want to volunteer or work in the Capitol someday, and they look at a story like this and they think, I don't want to be anywhere near this place, and you can't blame them.
Yeah, and things that we've seen in the past. I mean, we don't want to jump to any conclusions because we have seen some issues with that as well in the past at the.
That's right. We have to get all the facts out.
Yeah.
And we've been led down rabbit trails before on things that haven't panned out, but this is one that needs to. I know the General Investigating Committee, Karina, is said they're going to take a look at it. So I'm eager for it not to be a trial on Twitter, for it to have for the members to have their own facts, and for ultimately the voters of this district to have their say.
Yeah, I mean, Manny, what's your take on it? One Democrat asking for him to step down. I mean, do you expect others?
I'm sure others will, and I think colleagues in the legislature understand what their colleagues are up to, and so to see a number of lawmakers say that their colleague needs to step down, I think they know a lot of what's happening behind closed doors. And they're coming out and they're speaking out. Folks from his own party, from folks from the Democratic Party. The fact is, Representative Slayton should be expelled if he's doesn't resign. Yeah. I hope this investigation moves swiftly. There has been, as Ted said, there's been a long history of folks being harassed in the Texas Capitol. It shouldn't happen in the Texas Capitol. It needs to stop. Period. And I really hope the Texas House and administration leadership moves quickly on this, so that we can have a determination.
I want to jump really quickly. We just have about 2 minutes left, but to the voucher fight and being debated in a House committee. I mean, this is just days after the House voted to ban state funds from going to any voucher-like programs. So what's next, Ted? I mean, where do you see this going?
So the Senate passed a very robust voucher bill or ESA, parental choice bill, depending upon kind of what language you want to say. I think this is maybe the most interesting issue this session because of how dynamic it is. I think that we saw a lot of testimony and maybe into the night or possibly into the morning on this bill in the House Public Education Committee. I'm looking to see whether or not a slimmed down version of a bill that more focuses on kids with special needs, if that's something that the House Public Education Committee can get behind. I don't think a more robust bill, like we saw Senate Bill 8 from Chairman Creighton, is something that the House is interested in by virtue of the fact that they took a vote on the House budget that would basically sort of prohibit state funds. I think that there's room for innovation here, not something as robust as Senate Bill 8, but I am looking for the fact that the House can have their own imprint on what they want to see.
Manny, were you at all surprised by the vote in the House on the budget amendment, and kind of where do you see this going?
No, not at all surprised. It turns out that after some 10 years of Greg Abbott trying to work on this and all of the political show and all the tours and all the lobbyists paid for by these corporate private schools, it turns out he just loses by a lot. And he continues to lose by a lot. And the reality is these lawmakers understand that Greg Abbott's not going to have their back. So they're going to listen to their teachers, they're going to listen to their public high school coaches, they're going to listen to their community, and the community says it does not work.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how far this goes this session and whether it does continue to get stopped in the House. Interesting that they were hearing the debate on these bills today, but we'll see kind of where it all ends up. Manny, Ted, thank you very much. Turning now to Washington, the Texas Republican who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee has a major role to play in U.S. foreign affairs, whether it's the ongoing war in Ukraine or U.S. support for Taiwan. Our Washington reporter Rena Diamante spoke with Congressman Michael McCaul after his return from the hotspot in East Asia.
I know the Taiwanese very much appreciate our presence there.
Congressman Michael McCaul was briefly back in Washington Tuesday after leading a bipartisan delegation to Taiwan. The lawmakers met with Taiwan's president about the threat posed by China, which views Taiwan as its territory, not an independent nation. This after Taiwan's president met with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and China launched military drills near Taiwan in response.
I took it very seriously. It was an intimidation tactic. Saber rattling. We all received emails from the Chinese embassy warning us. While China did escalate tensions, I think it also provides a warning to China that, hopefully it will deter any act of aggression.
McCaul, who chairs the House Foreign Affairs Committee, believes Chinese leader Xi Jinping is closely watching how the West responds to Russia's invasion of Ukraine for clues to how the West might answer any Chinese attack on Taiwan. What do you think is the appetite among House Republicans to continue supporting Ukraine?
It's strong, but I wish the administration would do more to help with this counteroffensive in the springtime. If the Ukrainians are successful with their counteroffensive, I think you'll see more support. If they fail, then I think you're going to see support going down.
William Bowden, a national security expert, says the next months in Ukraine will be pivotal.
The Ukrainians have been signaling their plans for a spring offensive, and they need to do that because if it's just a war of attrition, Russia will eventually win.
McCaul also reviewed the Biden administration's newly completed classified report on its chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. He was highly critical of how the withdrawal was handled and the report's attempt to shift blame to former President Donald Trump.
I never thought negotiating with the Taliban was going to end with success. At the end of the day, as Harry Truman said, the buck stops here. And it was this president that made the decision.
McCaul said the online leaks of highly classified Pentagon documents about the Ukraine war were very damaging, and he believes whoever was involved needs to be held accountable. In Washington, Rena Diamante, Capitol Tonight.
And coming up next on Capitol Tonight, tackling prescription drug costs, how state lawmakers are looking to lower prices with Canada's help. Plus, setting the clocks permanently, why a push to keep Texas on daylight saving time doesn't look too bright. Welcome back. The Texas Senate approved along party lines today a bill that would ban faculty from compelling college students to adopt a belief that any race, sex, or ethnicity is superior. Proponents say it would keep faculty from imposing their views on students. Opponents say that's not an issue, and universities encourage students to think critically. The bill does not explicitly mention critical race theory, a framework used by scholars to examine racism, but that was brought up during debate today.
Are our universities allowed to teach critical race theory in our schools?
Senator, I'm not sure what your definition of critical race theory is, but let me be clear. Under this bill, no student can compel or attempt to compel a student to adopt a belief that one race is superior. That is the heart of critical race theory, as many people see it. So I'm not sure what definition you're using, but I want to be very clear about this.
This legislation is a priority of Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Texas lawmakers are considering reforms aimed at lowering prescription drug costs. One priority bill in the House would authorize the state's health commission to develop a plan to import certain prescription drugs from Canada. It would have to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration. The bill's author says the program would result in savings of 60 to 70% for consumers and millions of dollars for state agencies on prescription drug costs. And joining us now is the bill's author, Central Texas Democrat James Tallarico. Representative Tallarico, good to see you. Thanks for being on.
It's good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. This has bipartisan support and initially passed the Texas House today, but why import from Canada? How would that make it cheaper for consumers?
Texans pay twice what Canadians pay for their prescription drugs. We have the most unaffordable prescription drugs in the industrialized world. And so this bill would allow Texas to safely import certain prescription drugs from Canada for a lot less. The estimates are about 60 to 70% less. So this would provide affordable, cheap prescription drugs for Texans who desperately need them.
Yeah, during a hearing on this, some pharmaceutical groups testified against it, citing safety risks, safety concerns about bringing non-U.S. made drugs into Texas. I mean, what is the risk to health and safety?
There is no risk. This bill is creating a plan to import some drugs from Canada, but that would have to be approved by the FDA. Every step of the process would have to be FDA approved. And so this bill is a safe pathway to bring some of those affordable prescription drugs back to Texas. And I should say that organizations and political leaders across the spectrum support this bill. Donald Trump supports this bill, and so does Bernie Sanders. You rarely get those two on the same page. The only folks who aren't supportive of this bill are the pharmaceutical companies who profit off of the suffering of Americans to the tune of $90 billion a year.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, I think that there's a lot of people looking at this and being like, well, why can't it be made in Texas? Why do we have to go to Canada for this? Another argument. I mean, would this affect the local economy at all?
I would love for our state to invest in infrastructure to produce generic prescription drugs here at home. And there's some conversations about us doing that one day. But right now, Texans need help because 40% of Texans are skipping doses or going without their medication entirely because they can't afford it. And about 250,000 Americans are dying every year because they're not taking their medicine as prescribed. And so we've got a dangerously unsafe status quo, and that has to change. That's why Republicans and Democrats are coming together in our legislature to bring some of those affordable prescription drugs from our neighbors to the north back home to Texas.
Representative Tallarico, you were also a co-sponsor of a bill that passed the House this week to decriminalize fentanyl test strips. I wanted to ask you about that real quickly. I mean, how much do you think this will help in combating the rising number of opioid overdose deaths here in the state?
This is another bipartisan, common sense piece of legislation that we passed today. You can buy a test strip for about $1 that can tell you if a pill is laced with deadly fentanyl. But Texas is one of a handful of states that won't let you buy that test strip. And so today, Republicans and Democrats came together to finally legalize fentanyl test strips in the state of Texas. This bill can save lives. We are in the grips of a deadly fentanyl crisis. And this is just one tool in our toolbox to keep our neighbors safe.
You're looking at a lot of different drug costs and related bills. What else are you pushing?
I'm also pushing a bill to give every Texas teacher a $15,000 pay raise. We have a historic budget surplus in this state. We got about $47 billion, that's billion with a B, in extra money. And so we could use half of that, just half of that, to give every teacher a historic pay raise and therefore keep more of them in our classrooms serving our kids. So I hope we can get bipartisan support for that legislation as well.
I know something that we are watching closely with education funding and various things like that. Representative Tallarico, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Karine.
A pleasure. The Texas House voted today to keep the state on daylight saving time, like what we're in now, permanently. But even if it becomes state law, only Congress can let Texas make the shift. Under federal law, states are allowed to be on standard time year-round, but they don't have the power to permanently observe daylight saving time. The Texas bill still needs to be approved by the Senate and Governor Abbott. If it were to become law, Texas would join 19 states that have enacted or passed such measures. Still to come on Capitol tonight, what happens to leftover campaign money? How one congresswoman is trying to crack down on former members using the leftover donations for personal use. You're watching Capitol tonight. Well, Welcome back to Capitol Tonight. 1 week after former President Donald Trump was arraigned in a Manhattan court, the district attorney overseeing the case is suing Republican House Judiciary Committee Chair Jim Jordan. DA Alvin Bragg is trying to block a subpoena the House committee issued for testimony from Bragg's former senior prosecutor, claiming Jordan is attempting to interfere with the case against Trump. The House committee is also asking to see confidential testimony from Bragg. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are taking aim at so-called zombie accounts, the sometimes sizable campaign accounts of politicians who have retired from Congress or lost elections for Congress. The concern is that these accounts are ripe for abuse. Karina Capabianca spoke to the congresswoman who is helping to lead this effort.
Under the legislation, former federal office holders and unsuccessful candidates for federal office would have to close their campaign accounts within 2 years if they don't plan to run again. They would need to either donate the money to charity, refund it to donors, or contribute the money to a political party. Democratic Congresswoman Kathy Castor is the lead sponsor of the bill. She first introduced it after a 2018 investigation by the Tampa Bay Times and WTSP Tegna detailed numerous instances of former members of Congress using the leftover funds for personal use. One example, former Congressman Ron Paul paying his daughter $16,000 in leftover funds from his presidential campaign.
These studies have demonstrated that some members use it to fund their social club memberships, pay their cell phones, pay their families, become lobbyists, and then make campaign contributions. And these are all well outside of what political supporters intend when they provide a campaign contribution to someone running for Congress.
A measure similar to Castor's passed the House last Congress when Democrats were in control, but not the Senate. The new bill has the backing of fellow Florida Congressman Gus Bilirakis, a Republican, who said in a statement, quote, "We've seen egregious examples of former members keeping their campaign accounts open in perpetuity and personally benefiting from the proceeds. While they may not have explicitly broken the law, they have certainly violated the spirit of the law, which is wrong."
It's just a matter of when there is another kind of scandal or some sort of other crisis to help push this over across the finish line, we will be ready for that moment.
Currently, there's no similar version in the Senate, making its chance at passage slim. But Castor says you never know when an episode raises public opinion to the point where people demand action. In Washington, Karina Capabianca, Spectrum News.
And that is all the time that we have tonight. We're back again tomorrow with the latest in Texas politics. Until then, thanks for watching. Have a great night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. For more refreshing stories about your community, click the subscribe button over here. You can also download our Spectrum News app and tune in to Channel 55 on Dish and DirecTV to get live news coverage, weather updates every 10 minutes, and more. We'll see you then.